Hi everyone, it's Carissa. Today I'm going to show you 4 ways to join crocheted blocks. Some of them are going to be crocheted together and some of them will be sewn techniques. So you're going to need a crochet hook and you're going to need a tapestry needle as well. Our first technique is called the whip stitch, and I think this is probably the easiest one to master. But you can be the judge. This is a sewn technique, so we'll need a tapestry needle and a length of yarn roughly 3 times the length of the seam we're about to sew. So I'll put my yarn onto my tapestry needle, and whenever you're threading a needle, whether it's a tapestry needle or a sewing needle and thread, you never want to try to shove your yarn or your thread into the eye of the needle because you're just going to end up with a frayed mess. Instead, fold the yarn over the tapestry needle and pinch it between your fingers. That'll give you a nice crisp fold there. And then take your eye of your needle and push it down onto that folded yarn. And as you push it down in between your fingers, the folded yarn is just going to go right into the eye of your needle and you can just pull it through. Super easy. Now for our whip stitch technique, we're going to take both of our blocks and we're going to put them together with wrong sides together. So this is the right side of the blue block. This is the right side of the pink block. The wrong sides are on the inside right now. Now line up the edges here. And I'll start at one corner. I'm going to find the first stitch on the blue block and go under both legs of that stitch. Then I'll find the first stitch on the pink block and go under both legs of that stitch. And just pull my yarn through, leaving a few inches hanging out. Now I'm going to come back to the front of my work. I'm going to find the next stitch on the blue block and go under both legs of that stitch. The next stitch on the pink block and go under both legs of that stitch and pull that through. And repeat. Find the third stitch on the blue block, go under both legs of that stitch. The third stitch on the pink block, go under both legs of that stitch and pull through. Now the fourth stitch under both legs and under both legs there and pull through. And you're just going to repeat that all the way across, going under each corresponding pair of stitches, one from each block, and you're going to go under both legs of those stitches. Now we're almost to the corner of the blocks again, the opposite corner. I'm going to go under this last stitch here and the last stitch there. And I can go ahead and remove my tapestry needle. And there we go. There is our seam all finished. And you can see the whip stitches on the front and the back. However, if you use a color of yarn that's either the same as this block or the same as that block, you won't be able to see that. It'll blend right in. Our next technique is called the mattress stitch. This is another sewn technique, so we're going to start with a tapestry needle and again a string of yarn that is roughly 3 times the length of the seam that we're about to sew. I'm going to put this yarn onto my tapestry needle, fold the yarn over the needle and pinch that fold, then push the eye of the needle down onto the fold and it should slide right on. I'm going to take both of my blocks here. I'm going to put the seam that I'm about to sew next to one another. I'm going to start in the corner nearest me. So on the right hand block, I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to go up through this first stitch right here at the corner. I don't want to go up through the chain space, but up through the actual stitch, through both legs of the stitch. And pull my yarn through, leaving a few inches of tail. Then I'm going to come over to the left hand block and do the same thing. I'm going to find that first stitch in the corner and I'm going to go up through both legs of that stitch. Sorry, this one right here. There we go. Up through both legs of that stitch and pull. Now I'm going to go back to the right block. I'm going to go down in the stitch where my yarn came out before and then come up in the stitch next to it. So I'll go down right there in that stitch and then come up the next stitch over and pull that yarn through. Go back to the pink block over here and do the same thing. I'm going to go down where my yarn came out before and then up through the next stitch over. Back to the right hand block. I'm going to go down through the stitch where I came out before and up the next stitch. Back to the left block, down through the previous stitch, up through the next one. And we'll repeat that all the way across our seam, down where we came up before and then up in the next stitch. Down where we came in before, or out before, and up through the next stitch. Down there, up there, down there, up there. I'm going to repeat this all the way across the seam. When I've gotten an inch or two done, I'm going to hold on to the beginning tail and my working yarn here, and I'm going to pull in opposite directions, and that's going to tighten up that mattress stitch. And then I can continue the same way that I was going before. So I just finished a pink stitch. I'm going to go over to the blue block, go down where that yarn comes up, and come up in the next stitch. Down on the pink block and up in the next stitch. And repeat. And once you've gotten an inch or two done on each side, you can pull it tight again. If you have a particularly smooth yarn, you may be able to sew the entire seam before pulling it tight. But if your yarn is grabby at all, if it's like a bit of a crunchy wool, then it's going to have a little too much friction to want to pull the entire distance of the seam. So once you've done an inch or two, hold the tails and pull that tight. And then continue. Here we are at the end of our seam, so I'm going to go down through that one and up in the last stitch, down there and up in the last stitch. Give it one more pull to tighten. And there is our mattress stitch. So here is the front side of that. You cannot see the stitching yarn at all. And here's the back side. And once this is blocked, that'll lay nice and flat. You'll have maybe a little bit of a bump along the seam, but not too bad. And again, you can't really even see this yarn that I used to sew them together, so it doesn't matter as much what color yarn you use to seam with this technique. Now we're going to look at a couple of crocheted seaming techniques. So rather than using a tapestry needle and a pre-cut piece of yarn, these techniques use a crochet hook and yarn that is still attached to the ball. This first one is called the slip stitch method. So I'll start with both of my blocks right side up, and I'm going to flip one of them on top of the other. So now they are right sides facing, or wrong sides out. I'm going to line up the edges that I want to seam together, and I'm going to work a series of slip stitches across this seam using only the back loops of each of the edge stitches. And again, these are wrong sides out right now, so the back loop of the pink block is actually the leg that is nearest me, and the back loop of the stitches on the blue block are the stitches that are furthest away from me. So as I work across, I'm going to be taking the back loop of the pink and the back loop of the blue and working a slip stitch to join them. First, I'm going to start with a slip knot on my crochet hook. And now in the first corner here, I'm going to find my first pink stitch. So it's that one right there. And there are both legs of it. But I only want to take the back leg. And currently I'm looking at the back of the pink block. So I only want to take the leg nearest me. Then I'm going to find the first blue stitch here, but I don't want both legs, I just want the back leg. And currently the back of the blue block is facing away from me. So the stitch, the leg of this stitch that's furthest away from me is the back loop of that stitch. Once I'm through both of those back loops, I'm going to yarn over and draw up a loop, and I'm going to keep pulling that through my slip knot as well to make a slip stitch. Now I'll go into the back loop of the next pink stitch, so the loop loop nearest me, right there. Then I'll find the next stitch on the blue block and go through the loop furthest away from me, back leg of that stitch. Yarn over, draw up a loop, and pull it all the way through the loop on my hook to make a slip stitch. There's the third stitch. I'm going to go into the loop nearest me and the loop furthest away from me. Yarn over, draw up a loop, and all the way through for a slip stitch. And you want to keep your slip stitches somewhat loose. If you work them too tightly, then this seam is going to be sort of scrunched together and your blocks are going to be kind of puckered around the edges, and that's not what you want. So we're going to continue working into the leg of this stitch nearest me and then the leg of that stitch furthest away from me, and make a slip stitch. Loop nearest me and the loop furthest away, and work a slip stitch. I'm going to continue this all the way across until I have this entire seam slip stitched together. And here's my last stitch, slip stitched together. I'm going to take my scissors and snip that yarn, draw that through my last loop and pull it tight. And there's my slip stitch completed. So here is the back of that, and there's the front. And on the front side you can see that the front loops of these edge stitches that we did not work into, they sort of butt up against each other and create a nice clean line in between the blocks. And once you block your project, this will lay nice and flat, and you'll have a nice neat edge on the back as well. And again, if you use a color of yarn that is either the same as this block or the same as this block, you're not even going to see when you stretch that out. You can see those slip stitches. But if you use a color that matches one of these blocks, you won't even be able to see that. Our fourth technique is the single crochet method. So this also uses a crochet hook and yarn that is still attached to the ball. With our blocks currently facing right side up, I'm going to flip them both right side down and then flip one on top of the other. So now they are wrong sides facing or right sides out. And I'm going to line up the edges that I want to seam together. I'm going to put a slip knot on my hook. And now this method has a couple of different features to it, and I think they're pretty interesting. So this is going to be worked through the front loops only of both of the blocks. So just like before, we have to think about how the blocks are oriented. Right now the pink block is facing me, so the front loop is also facing me. That is the nearest loop to me. And then the blue block is right side out as well, so the right side is away from me, so the front loop of that stitch is also going to be further away from me. So as I insert my hook into the first stitch in the corner, I only want to go through the front loop, the loop nearest me in that stitch. And then when I get the back block, the blue block here, I only want to go through the loop furthest away from me, because that is also the front loop of the blue block. And one of the added benefits of this technique is that we can take the tail of my pink block here and I can crochet around that as I work this single crochet technique so that I don't have to weave in that end. So now I've got my hook under the front loop of each block and also under the tail that I want to weave in. And now I'm going to take my working yarn, yarn over the hook, draw up a loop, yarn over, and complete my single crochet. And now into the next pink stitch there, I'm going to go into the front loop there, loop nearest me. I want to make sure I go under the tail as well, and then the blue block on the back, I want to go through the loop furthest away from me, yarn over, draw up a loop, yarn over, and pull through two. The next stitch there, I'm going to go through the loop nearest me on the pink block. I also want to go under the tail, and on the blue block in the back, I want to find the loop furthest away from me. Yarn over, draw up a loop, yarn over, pull through two. I'm I'm going to continue that all the way across the loop nearest me, under the tail, and then under the loop furthest away from me as well. And work a single crochet. Front loop, under the tail, and the back loop, and work a single crochet. Front loop, under the tail, under the back loop, single crochet, all the way across. And now I'm almost to the corner here. I've got one more pink stitch under the tail and under the last blue stitch, the back loop only. Single crochet, grab my scissors and snip that yarn. And draw through the last loop and pull that tight. And there's my single crochet. And now this one, because we worked it with the right sides out, it actually creates a bit of a ridge there along the seam. And if you do it in a contrasting color like I have here, you end up with all of your blocks sort of outlined throughout your blanket or whatever sort of project you're working on. So it kind of gives it an extra little detail, and it weaves in those ends at the same time, which is fantastic. Regardless of which technique you choose, whether you crochet your blocks together or sew them, I highly recommend doing this with lots of blocks at the same time. So you can start down here in the bottom corner and seam these two blocks together, and then without cutting your yarn, just continue seaming these two blocks together as well. And when you've sewn a bunch of pairs together all in a row, then come back and do the opposite seams. So seam these two together and then these two all with the same same piece of yarn. That's going to lead to a lot fewer ends to weave in and a much happier hooking experience.